Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Emily.
And you are watching That Christian Vlogger. We like to say that this is a place where you get to join us and experience faith in the first person. And today we are answering a question that many of you guys have been asking. So even though I'm reading, I think it's Ashley's comment, if you left a comment, know that we also read yours as well. Ashley writes in and says, please talk about how to prepare for a relationship and how to be ready and mature spiritually. And so let's talk today about a couple things that we think are super important before you try to start like the whole dating or like relationship phase of your life and you're like getting serious in that area. What are some things that you would say kind of are prerequisites or things that you really should figure out beforehand?
Great question.
Yes. In fact, most people don't ask this question. Most people are just like, hey, I like the person likes me, and who are you to tell me what to do? So I'm just going to go and do it. And I think pumping the brakes just for a little bit are actually really, really helpful because it can save you a lot of pain and heartache. It'll save you a lot of challenges moving forward, and hopefully it'll help you make better decisions also.
Great question. So I think like some of the practical tips of advice that are non-spiritually applicable are probably like being done with your schooling.
Yes.
Like before a marriage, at least, like you can like be serious prior to that.
So, on that, like being done with school, like right around when you're getting married, definitely it's harder to continue your like college education when you're married because there's so many new things. And so we would definitely recommend if you're going to get married that you don't do it until like the end is near for college, like your last year of college, or even ideally you're done with college. So if you're thinking about dating and college is 8 years away, that might not be the best time for you to be focused on dating or relationships. Instead, it might be better to focus on school at that point.
Exactly. Another thing I'd say practical wise is like be kind of financially ready, which can be hard towards your end of school. You could be like, if you're in medical school, you could be like, $300,000 in debt. I don't know.
Hopefully it's not that much.
Hopefully it's not that much, but like, do you want to marry into something like that? Is that attractive to someone? You know what I mean? Like, whew.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I had some debt before we got married, but fortunately it's not too much, so.
Yeah, and maybe even if you're not necessarily financially sound, or maybe that's just too far away, maybe you're still in high school and like you can't really deal with that yet, I would say kind of in conjunction with that is it's really important to be able to know how to work.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't quite have like thousands of dollars saved up in the bank yet, but if you know how to have a job and if you had multiple jobs and you know what it's like to work hard, that's something that's really valuable as well, because ultimately when you end up in a relationship, you have to, whether you're the male or the female, especially nowadays, it really takes like two incomes to make things really work and to be successful. It's important for you to be able to know how to get a job, how to keep a job, and how to even like advance and progress in that. And so something that you did during when you were like in high school and stuff like that is that you did like summer camps and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So summer camp's a great experience because not only are you doing a job, but it's also in a certain sense like a ministry at the same time. So it's actually helping yourself grow spiritually, right?
And I've had a job since I was like 14. Like I haven't been unemployed since that time. Like in school, I had a job even though I was like involved in like basketball and all these other things. Just because like actually having a job through like your scholastic time like actually makes you work harder and you actually get better grades for some reason. Like studies have been shown that if you have a job. So
yeah, and that's the same thing for me growing up. One of the things that my dad was like really, really consistent in doing is like, hey dad, if I wanted to like say there was an event at school or I wanted to go hang out with my friends, or if I wanted to buy like a new video game system or whatever the case is, I said, hey dad, can I have some money to do this? Rather than saying yes, he like never said yes like right away. His response always was, okay, cool. Like how many hours are you willing to work for it? And I remember one time that I was working with like my brother and my cousin Jonathan, and we were basically digging holes, because we were not holes, we were like digging trenches to help install like a sprinkler system at the house. And that was like, I don't know, 40, 50 hours in like 1 week of just like manual labor that I had never done before. And that really was one of the ways that my dad tried to prepare me for the future and to help teach me like the importance of being able to work hard. And like if you have something that you want, if you have something that you desire, to be able to be putting in the hours in order to do that. And I think that's something that a lot of us miss out on. We're out just always hanging out with friends. We're always doing like the fun things in life, but not really preparing ourselves for the future. And so that's the question that I would ask you guys, whether it's like education wise, like we mentioned first, or even financially. Are you preparing yourself for the future? So if you're 16 years old, and let's say what grade are you in if you're 16 years old in high school?
Usually a sophomore or something.
So let's say you're a sophomore in high school. College is still several years away. It's certainly finishing college is several years away. You've never had a job. What's the point in having a relationship at that point?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. What are the number one reasons why marriages or relationships fail long term? A lot of times it happens to deal with like financial instability, like immaturity, and the inability to like really just deny self and do the things that are required.
Yeah.
And so those two things are super huge in developing while you are young.
On more of a spiritual note, what would you say?
Obviously, when it comes to things that you need to have in a relationship, I've done a lot of videos on this in the past, so you can definitely search through like the archives, but being in a relationship is super important to have a relationship with God, especially, I mean, obviously, if you're a follower of Jesus. That is, at the bare minimum, what you need more than anything else. Like the education, the financial stability, like the ability to work, like all these things are super important. But if you don't have Jesus in your own heart, how can you have Jesus in your relationship, right? Yeah, a lot of times pastors will use the illustration of like a triangle where there's like two people on either end. So it would be like Emily on this end, me on this end, and then God up at the top. And a lot of times people try and focus on like this dimension of the relationship. So Emily and Justin try to get closer together. But when we do that, we're actually not growing closer to God. So a different way to approach it is Justin, as an individual, try to get closer towards God, and Emily, as an individual, tries to get closer to God as well. And what happens is as we progress towards God individually, then you and I actually get closer to each other at the same time. And so one thing that is super important is having a relationship with God for yourself, and like not just where you go to church and like maybe you participate in youth group, kind of like culturally, because you all know what it's like. Sometimes you're forced to go to church. Maybe your parents will say, hey, we're going to church, get in the vehicle. You're like, like you don't really want to. Well, that's not really like your personal relationship with God. Like simply going to church isn't really what we're talking about, is it?
Yeah. And I think as you grow closer to God and you get more serious with that, your values will align with the other person more as well. Like your values aren't at once as they used to be. Like maybe you used to be like more into things of this world or partying or something like that. And even as a Christian, whatever. And even as a Christian, like you kind of just practice Christianity and didn't have the relationship with God. So like as you focus more on God and have the relationship, the goals you want in life become more serious in a good way. You still have fun too, but that's kind of what you want in marriage. Would you want to be married to a guy who's like not like unequally yoked in your spiritual lives, and like he doesn't go to church with you, or he goes out on the weekends and hangs out with his buddies at a bar, you know what I mean? So yeah. So definitely the values become more aligned too.
Yeah, a lot of times we get the question like, what age do you recommend to start like dating and to get serious about a relationship? And for me, like with the whole school and finances thing, to me, it really doesn't make the most sense to start a relationship until you're like maybe in your early 20s. Maybe that's around when you can start figuring those things out. But if you're in high school and things like that, the reality is there's so much more that you really could be working on. And that sucks to hear when you're in high school, but like that would be my honest advice, because when you're in high school, you really don't know who you are yet. You're still growing, you're still developing. And I would say between the ages of like 16 and like maybe even like 22-ish, that's where so much changes in life. Like the person who I was at 16 was so drastically different from 17. And like, it seemed like almost like every single year, like I kind of like changed who I was. I changed my interests. I changed my hobbies. I changed my values. And so that could be really challenging. Like if Emily and I started dating when we were really young, and every year we're both changing to different people and we're still like growing and developing into who we're going to be, then that's going to be really difficult to make that relationship work long term. So instead of focusing on that, like it's totally fine to go out and hang out with groups and friends to get to know people on a social level. But I would suggest to make sure that you're not like so tied down to one person, like you're gonna marry that person, because the chances are that's not how it's gonna work out. So maybe focus on the big picture instead.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. If you could go back to Emily, who let's say is 15 years old, what's one piece of advice that you would give to Emily?
I'll be patient, because I was just, all my friends were dating people, and I was like, man, I want a boyfriend for security, for, you know,
Emotional reasons.
support. But in the end, I would say, like, I had one boyfriend before Justin, like, we dated for 2 years. I would say, like, I don't regret that experience, because I, like, found out what I did and didn't like in certain personalities and kind of what clicked with me. So I think God sometimes leads you in relationships that are worth it. Not saying that you should, like, date a different person every year and, like, get pieces of your heart broken off, but I would just say, to myself, I'd be patient.
So you're saying, because I mean, that to someone listening, that might sound like conflicting advice, and maybe you haven't thought it through, or maybe we haven't thought it through entirely. You're like, we're saying on one hand, wait, but then you just brought up a really good point. Like, sometimes God does bring people into your life, and sometimes there is value in dating someone when you're young. So how do we try and reconcile that? You didn't even think about it.
You answered that.
So she brings up something really interesting, because here we are on one hand saying that it's really valuable waiting and figuring out these different parts in life. But you just mentioned how you actually had a relationship when you were like 18 years old or something like that, and how maybe that was a little premature in certain areas, but there was still a blessing in that. And I've actually had the same experience too. When I was, I want to say I was like 16 years old, I had a fairly serious relationship. I was in a relationship for like 2 years, and then after that one ended, I was in a different relationship for like 2 years. And yes, there was a lot that I learned from that was good. It kind of helped me learn what kind of things I do like, what kind of things I don't like in a person. But what I will say with all that, like, of course there is good in that. And so if you're in a relationship now, I'm not like trying to say break up. Like, there's obviously good that you can learn from it. But what I'm saying is, don't neglect like the pursuit of a relationship. Don't allow that to distract you from the big picture. So if you are the kind of person who has the ability to like handle your emotions and to handle a relationship, and yet still be able to keep your eye on the future, to still develop yourself as like a professional person, your walk with God and all these other things, then I think maybe there's room for allowing that to happen. But the reality is sometimes that can be really, really difficult. And even like for me, when I was in those relationships, I realized, man, like, it's super difficult to try and stay focused on God and to grow my relationship with God when I was at that age, that I couldn't do it simultaneously. And that's actually why I ended up breaking up with that girl, because I said, you know what, like, I'm too divided right now, and I can't handle that. I need to first find myself in Jesus. And that's actually what happened to you, right?
Exactly, yeah. Some of them can be beneficial.
And what kind of sucks is that at the end of that, what happens is, like, you have like this person who was like your best friend, who was like a super close friend, but then if you end up breaking it off like that, usually what happens is you kind of go separate ways, and you end up losing a friend in the process. And so that, I guess that's why we're trying to say is there might be value in you just waiting on like an actual dating relationship until you have some of these things figured out. Think about it this way: the right person, even at the wrong time, can still be the wrong person. And so if you don't have all the other things that we're talking about, and if it's really not the right time for you yet, then maybe it's still, like, what you're saying is being patient. Maybe that's really the route you should be taking. Yeah, it makes me think of like the verse in Matthew where it says, you know, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. So if you are so focused on seeking like your own desires, like your own relationship, like that's what you want, and you're doing so to the neglect of seeking God first, then that's a recipe for disaster in your life. You're going to be heartbroken. Things are going to be really challenging for you. But if you can learn to seek God first and His righteousness, right? If you can do that first, then you'll be able to get the things that you know also matter as well, because you put God in His proper place.
For sure.
So in recap, we talked about a couple things. We suggested that you kind of be in a good place with your education. We also talked about finances, your walk with God, and like certain work ethics. And I guess we could also add in like character development. Like if you find yourself always like just blowing up at people, like that would be for me, like always just frustrated at people, like it's probably good to practice that before you meet the love of your life, and then you end up like being mad at that person for the rest of your life too.
Yeah. Character development.
Yeah, character development, exactly.
Yeah.
But we're also interested in hearing what you guys have to say, especially if you're older or if you've been in relationships before. What are some things that you could recommend that would be important to have before seeking a relationship, before you start dating or going into that whole phase of your life? Let us know in the comment section below. But yeah, that's it for today's Veda. Thank you guys for hanging out with us today, and we will see you guys tomorrow. But until next time,
we are That Christian Vlogger, and we encourage you to experience faith in the first person. God bless. Okay. That's awkward.